Noon talkradio.nyc.
Have you ever thought of reinventing yourself? Are you looking to create a new life's journey? Hi, I'm Kevin Barbaro, host of Coffee Talk XL every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live to hear me and my guests from a variety of different backgrounds. As a former college coach and a current full-time actor and owner of multiple companies, my show is as eclectic as my life. That's Coffee Talk XL every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Do you feel uninformed about menopause and how it impacts on your life? Hi, I'm Pat Duckworth, women's health strategist and host of the Hot Women Rock radio show, empowering women leaders at menopause. Join me every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. UK time on talkradio.nyc for interviews with inspirational women who will share their top tips to rock your world.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Howdy, I am Joseph host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hello, thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Wise Content Creates Wealth. You've heard that content is king. Well, wise content rules the world. Wise content is data intelligence-driven storytelling content created for promotional purposes. It is the heart of modern marketing, and without it, digital marketers will fall behind their competition, lose connectivity with their customers, and ultimately fail at being profitable. I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, and I'm a marketing technology expert. I'm also an award-winning content producer who has created incredibly detailed, high-quality articles and books. Additionally, I lead content teams that produce thousands of pieces of SEO content a month for Fortune 500 companies. My company is Galileo Tech Media, which executes on creating wise content and marketing campaigns. Galileo was created out of a desire to get away from the drudgery of daily marketing by creating content that we send out of the world to find an audience and bring back sales and leads for months and sometimes years. We have created content that doubled sales for a hotel within a month. We have sent a single tweet out that generated 50,000 subscriptions within an hour. We have made videos that go viral and cause giant corporations to change policies with a single email. Read more about us at GalileoTechMedia.com and sign up for our newsletter where we will keep you in the know about wise content. Now today we're going to talk about mythology and storytelling. You know, I love reading great stories in business books. I came across one from Exploiting Chaos by Jeremy Gutsche. It refers to the fact that Procter & Gamble was failing miserably in Japan and had lost hundreds of millions of dollars. But then things turned around when it launched an incredibly profitable advertising campaign for SK2, a premium skin cream. Here's the storyline of the ads. The fascinating story behind SK2 began as a sake brewery in Japan, where scientists noticed the elderly workers had wrinkled faces, but extraordinarily soft and youthful hands. These hands were in constant contact with the sake fermentation process. It took years of research for scientists to isolate the miracle ingredient, patera, a naturally occurring liquid from yeast fermentation process. Based upon this advertising campaign, SK2 became an enormously successful product, generating 150 million in sales by 1999. I am fascinated by this type of success based upon a creation story. I love to understand why it works and use it for my projects. There's lots of stories and different kinds of stories in content and in marketing and in business. And to understand it better and the mythology stories, I always turn to my friend Leigh Melander. Hello, Leigh.
Hey, Joseph, how are you?
So Leigh has a doctorate in cultural mythology and psychology and has a background in writing and the performing arts, marketing and strengthening communities nationally, internationally. She is the founder and head fomenter at Spillian, a place to Revel, her regenerative center for imagination, creativity in the Catskills in New York. So that's where we met, didn't we?
That sure is. Our first year we were open, actually.
Yeah.
First event we did, public event.
2014. You were on the board of the Joseph Campbell Foundation.
Yep.
And you had the first Joseph Campbell Hero's Journey workshop at Spillian in the East Coast, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. You know, that was a transformative experience for me. Let me just say, you know, my wife had just recently died, you know, like 6 or 7 months before. I was struggling with who I am, whatever. And I went to that workshop and it really opened me up a lot about, you know, life and the mythology of the life. And one of the important things is we had a mock funeral for something we wanted to say goodbye to. And I actually said goodbye to the identity of Joseph and my wife, Donna was her name, Donna McElroy, because that had been an identity of Joseph and Donna McElroy. I'd been living for, you know, 20 some years. And now that identity no longer exists. So I'd said goodbye to her and had funerals for her. You know, I'd done all sorts of things, you know, in terms of memorializing her, but I had not taken care of that identity of who I was and said goodbye. And understanding that mythology was very important for me.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think it lays people open in ways they don't anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you were with the Joseph Campbell Foundation for a number of years, right?
Yes. Yep. And I still actually write for them. And I have the podcast that I do is on their podcast channel. So we're still connected. I was at a point where I had just opened this business, Spillian in the mountains, and was trying to juggle that and life and all of it. And I thought, I can't do all these pieces. So I thought, I don't need to be a decision maker for the organization anymore. I just want to go think about this.
Well, you got it launched. You know, yeah. I'm also very fond of Spillian because, you know, my first trip with Simone was just to Spillian, who's my wife now. And then we have twin babies, now 3-year-olds. Their first trip was to Spillian. So Spillian has been part of my creation story of my new life.
It's in your DNA, man. It is. Yeah, it's a place that does it. That's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah.
So I was looking at your LinkedIn and what you said, and I didn't know that you had been an expert on a History Channel series.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
What was that about?
It was called True Monsters, and they were looking for, I was one of a number of voices talking about sort of stories, big mythic stories around monsters and hauntings and scary bits all throughout the US. And part of what was really interesting to me about that show is it was great. It was a production company in St. Paul in Minnesota that was doing it for the History Channel. And it was fun and the production value was great. But they kept saying, well, is the story true? Is it real? And I was frustrating to them because I kept saying, not the point. Maybe. Because I
Maybe, yeah.
think that for me, that's what myth sits in this place. The ancient Greeks used to talk about how myth was the thing that was simultaneously most and least true. And so
Mhm.
they weren't necessarily talking about literal truth necessarily, but they were talking about sort of an insight metaphorically into stuff that matters, which is why I think this so connects into content marketing, right?
Right.
When we're weaving origin stories, and I loved the story about the yeast and Procter and Gamble, and Spillian actually was built by the Fleischmann's yeast family. So we have a yeast origin story there as well. Actually, the Fleischmanns actually spent a bunch of years touting the health advantages of yeast to the point where they got into some trouble because they went a little overboard. But
But you know, Japan is Far East.
yes. Oh, where's my drum kit, man?
Anyway,
I need a hi-hat.
I had to get that in there.
So yeah, and I think the part of what I think all of us struggle with when we're building content is sort of, where does the story sit, right? Where does the truth lie in the story? Because there's got to be some truth. If it's just BS,
Right.
it's not ethical necessarily.
It's got to have an element, it's like,
in essence, right?
when I've always been a big talker, and I've made business by being a talker, and I say I've never lied about anything I've ever said, but I might have exaggerated a little bit.
Right, the old line, never let the facts get in the way of a good story.
or made it dramatic or whatever, right?
Yeah,
but it's always got the essence of the truth there, right? So I understand what you're saying there. Now, you also have a podcast, Myth America. What is that? You mentioned it was on
the Joseph Campbell Foundation, their channel, and it's on a variety of Apple and various other locations. And it's actually been quiet over this last year. I used to do it as a radio show. I was doing it as an NPR affiliate for 4 years, and then took a break, and then started last winter. And then my husband actually had a stroke, and it, like, trying to get him back online and this business back online after being closed for a year with the pandemic. I just actually, you should know that doing this with you just kicked me into gear, and I just recorded one last night. So I'm
all right, fabulous.
So see, you've done it again. Joseph has this magic sparking energy, and Myth America is really, it's my riff. Occasionally I have guests, but more often than not, I'll take an idea, kind of a concept that's sitting in American culture that we are working in, that I think has mythic elements to it, and just try to peel it open. And to me, a lot of what myth is about, or looking at myth is about, is actually looking how to see into a story and start to pull it apart and understand kind of what's cooking in us, what's sitting in our psyches, what are we reaching for, what are we hungering for, what's it turning on or turning away. And so this show is very much about kind of picking, and I'm all over the map. Sometimes it's political, sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's things like, I'll take an idea. I've just been actually not jotting down notes about how we have a big story in American culture right now about being comfortable is sort of the thing that we want to do. And so is that true, right? Is that really, maybe that's a story that we're telling ourselves that isn't necessarily as helpful as we think it is. So the tagline for the show is the stories that we tell and the stories that tell us. Because the idea is that we are as shaped by the stories that we let in and that we value and that we retell. So when you're being Joseph, the big man telling the big stories, that's making you as much as you're making the story, right? That's part of your identity as well. So we really, and I think one of the values of looking at myth in an analytical way is you have an opportunity to actually start to see where those stories are coming from and decide if that's where you want them to come from. Like if that's really what the story you want to be living into.
I think that's very cool. One of the things that you talk about being the big story, but what happens when you're not there to be able to tell the big story, right?
Yeah.
And the networking has been dead in New York City, and I'm sure in many places across the United States. How to network to find business and things like that. Do you find for me, I started the podcast as a way to push my big personality out there to try to generate opportunities. Have you found that to be successful for you in your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really fun and intriguing to see the responses that people have. There was a week that I was the most popular podcast in New Zealand, which was very exciting. Who would have thought? But yeah, there's something wonderful, and doing radio too. There's something wonderful about sending it out there and speaking to people and just trusting that someone's going to hear it. There's something about that.
Well, in my conception of wise content, a podcast is one of those pieces of content you send out in the world, and see what comes back. Well, we're going to take a break, our first break, and when we come back, we'll dig further into mythology and story making and content marketing.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hello, this is Joseph Franklin McElroy back with Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast, and my guest, Leigh Melander. So, Leigh, you're telling me that this podcast is causing dogs and cats to wrestle each other. So we're creating a new myth. We're creating a new myth that our podcast causes animals to engage.
They do.
Play.
It's all about play, man.
So why does storytelling matter when we're creating content?
Well, I think it's the key. I think we human beings think in two ways. We think in images and we think in stories. And the closer we can get to keying into an image that has meaning and building a story around that, the closer we get to actually reaching out and touching people, right? We can share facts and expository stuff and people's eyes glaze over. The minute you start telling a story, everything changes. And so I think it is the single most important way we communicate with each other in a general way, but I also think it's the most powerful tool that we can use as we're trying to tell the world about the work that we do and invite them in to see what matters. Right.
Now you mentioned about it's important to have an element of truth in a myth, right? Mm-hmm. But can a lie be a myth?
So this is, and that's one of the fun things as a mythologist is that's what you see, hear from people all the time, right? It's like, well, myths are lies. And we talk about that. Well, that's not the truth. That's a myth. And I think it's a real misunderstanding of what myth is. And I think it's a reflection actually of a culture that likes to think in really binary ways, right? Something's either true or not true, or right or not right. And so what I love about myth is that it sits in this kind of paradoxical way in the middle of that. And it's a little slippery. And what happens with that, I think, is that it opens things up, and it invites you to think imaginally. It invites you to put yourself in one way or another into that story frame. So it's a very particular way of knowing, I think. And I think it sits, there's a lot of conversation about like the binary between mythos and thinking mythically and story-based, and logos, thinking logically. I think there's actually a more intertwining than people think there are there. But I think for me, it's actually a kind of third way where you're, because all of us, when we're telling stories, we're always creating, right? We're always, and every time, if you have a story that you've told, you tell it once and it's a story, and then you tell the second time and you kind of note where you got responses and where the energy came back to you, right? So you think, oh, okay, we're doing subconsciously, oh, that works. So then you play it, or we work it a little bit again, and so that's how it sort of expands. And it doesn't mean that the story itself is, as you said, it's not a lie, but it's also sitting in this place where you are amplifying what's working. And I think the biggest piece is that you start to help people think metaphorically rather than literally. And I think to me, the biggest piece of this is that it's inviting people to have the feels, like logic doesn't, certainly in my business, I know you're in the hospitality business as well as in the tech business. And I would be willing to bet Galileo Tech is only this much about the technology, and it's this much about how people are made to feel when they're engaging with your clients, right?
Well, it's interesting when you say that, it's that when you're telling the story again and again, you're gauging the response, right? So that it becomes better and more in tune. Online, you don't have a necessarily an audience feedback in the moment, right? And that's where I was saying data intelligence is important. Right, because that's the feedback, right? So in terms of the digital marketing world, taking that concept and really using data to give you that feedback to refine and develop the story further is really important.
Hugely, right? Because and I am not nearly as scientific about this as you are, but I spend a lot of time. I'll throw stuff out and see, and sometimes it's as simple as how many likes you get on Instagram, and one of the sort of baselines is, can this compete against the cat video memes, right? Like cat it's the thing we're all up against, right? How can we actually compete with the cat pictures? But it's really, even without having the wealth of wisdom that you have around this, I can play with a word placement and suddenly something has changed dramatically. And so I will often sort of iterize, if that's a word, I'll kind of create new iterations of something. So I'm really doing exactly that kind of iterative storytelling in that process. And what happens, I think, is that when it works, the story may get bigger and broader and kind of more mythic and feel, but you're getting to the essence of what you're trying to communicate. That's, I think, the key here, and helping people find a way to connect with it emotionally.
I think, like I said, in hospitality, and one of the things that I do is something called memorable tourism experiences, right? And that's about emotional feedback, and it's about the experienced people. So, for a lot of businesses, and for a business like mine, I don't have a lot of time. I figured out a way that you can actually gauge some of that simply, right? And then is that, when Google pulls stuff from your page to show it in the search results, they will put the title that you put in the page title tag in there, and they'll put the meta description there, right? And if you play with the story in that meta description and the title, you can hit the highlights, and then you can see the click-through rates. You can see the click-through. Google will tell you the click-through rate for that page, and that will tell you how engaging and how interesting that is to the people. And then you can do tests with that over weeks, and really keep refining. And it's a good way to refine that approach, to find out what the emotional triggers.
Yeah, absolutely. We're doing, in addition to the workshops and stuff that we produce, we're doing a lot of weddings at Spillian, which was kind of something that neither my husband or I anticipated, but it happened, and it's actually pretty cool. We look We're working really hard to help people figure out what is meaningful in their lives and how they make meaning. And that's a big moment to do it. And it's been very interesting as we've entered into that sphere, that talk about, being about the feels, right? People are yearning for this very particular kind of emotional experience there. And so we found that the more we go deep into the kind of the essence of what we're dreaming, we have a very particular way of doing weddings. We co-create with people. We're not a typical wedding venue at all. And so we're looking for a very particular kind of client. We're looking for people that are creative, that want to co-create something that's theirs, that are really interested in going down into kind of deep into who they are together, and not necessarily being caught by what the industry says you should think is important, but instead really kind of peeling that out and saying, what is it that we want? Who is it that we want are together? And how do we want to mark that, not just as this kind of big celebration, but really as a launch pad. And as we started to figure that out, and then started to figure out how to tell that story about how we came at it and how it reflects who we are, and what Spillian is as a place, and what its big kind of heart mission is, that has allowed us to then connect into the people who are working their own stories in a way that connects. There's a kind of sympathetic resonance that happens. And I think your example of the headline and the meta description, if we say the best wedding venue in the Catskills, who cares, right? There's no story in that. If we say, come and find yourself and your soul, and here's why, like it starts to open something up. And as we start to open, part of the gift of what we have is there's a lot of story embedded in the place. It's Spillian. It's a historic property. It's had all sorts of cool stuff happen. There's a lot of particular energy there, as you know, because you've been there. And so the better we are at telling that and reaching out with that, that's then the people that are going to resonate with that find us, which is really interesting, And I remember there was a moment that when we first put our website up, I was trying to figure out, we were starting this thing from scratch, and we'll try this and we'll try that. So I had this website that was very much about trying to be a little bit of everything for everybody. And about a year and a half in fact, actually after some of the conversations I had with you, it occurred to me that I needed to put it out there and really clearly tell the story that I thought mattered about that place. And our business doubled within 2 months.
Yeah, if you do the right stories, and it's really important to understand your business, because some businesses are mostly just price sensitive, right? You got to be the cheapest dental floss out there, though you got to make sure people believe that it works. So there's a little bit of storytelling there, but in terms of like hospitality, I think the creation stories of this place itself and its products and services is important. What is, we talk about stories, we talk about myths. What's the difference between myths and stories?
Well, in some ways they're the same thing. And I think in other ways, a myth starts to get into something that is bigger and grander and broader than the kind of one-off stories that we tell each other. There's the, oh, honey, I was at the grocery store today and this happened. That's very different than a story that starts to become mythic in its scope. And one of the pieces, I think, is that it begins to connect into some very particular ways that human beings process things. Carl Jung, who was one of the psychologists that really started looking at myth in this way, talks about something he calls the collective unconscious, which is, it's an idea that not all psychologists buy into, but I think there's some truth here, that we have certain things that are big tropes in our lives that we want and that we desire or that we're afraid of, and so when a story starts to become mythic, when it starts to work that in a way that feels bigger than just the immediacy of my own life. And there's a lot of, a lot of people think myth and they either think lie or they think, oh, those Greek and Roman gods, right? Like those are the options. Or if you're of another culture, African gods or whatever. But what I'm interested in is how myth sits in our culture now, and what are the big stories that we're sitting in. So one of my grad school faculty members, one of my buddies there, a guy named David Miller, who was taught many years at Syracuse before he came to where I got my doctorate. David used to talk about how myths are the television programs running in the background for us. So it's kind of the stuff that we sit in and we aren't even necessarily even aware that they're there. So if you think about big American cultural myths, there's the, kind of the self-made man myth, right? Like there's an independence myth. We've got myths about what it means to be patriotic. We've got myths about what it means to be successful. And it doesn't mean that they're lies, but they're sitting in a kind of complexity in the background of how we make all sorts of decisions. And I think where this relates to companies that are trying to figure out how to talk to the world, there are a whole lot of company assumptions. There's sort of deep identity, essence, mythologies that are sitting in any organization about what you value and how you come at the world and what matters to you and how you make decisions. And that all kind of sits in the background. And I think we are increasingly, audiences we are barraged with information, right? In a way that we, as human beings, we never have been before. And part of, I think, what it takes to cut through that is to start to try to peel back those layers and connect in this way that people say, I resonate with you. Spillian connected in part because of that amazing experience with Bob Walter and Joseph Campbell Foundation, but the place did beyond that, right? Like it
itself, it had its own mythology, which is
it
great.
does, yeah.
Well, we have to take a break now, and I want to talk more about that mythology when we come back, of Spillian and some of the other things that you have to talk about.
Cool.
Howdy, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who will expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc, now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hello, this is Joseph Franklin McElroy, back with the Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast. And my guest, Leigh Melander. So Leigh, you talked about mythos and logos briefly before. How would they shape how we talk to customers?
So I think if you're gonna use that as sort of a big set of buckets, I think logos is the moment that you're talking information, you're talking data, you're talking, so let's use hospitality. We have 8 bedrooms, checkout time is at 11, here's the rate, here's the cost. Like it's very, and that's important to have, right? Because if people can't land, you can have all the grand ideas in the world, but if they don't know what the specifics are. So it's really the kind of operational details, I think, in some ways, and a kind of clarity of thinking of how you are presenting your professionalism, I think, because that's part of what people are looking for too, right? That if they're going to invest money or time or resources into you, they want to make sure that it's going to be what you're promising. So there's a role for that, right? If we get too woo-woo-y, I'm making up words today.
Yeah.
But if we get too far out there and we don't remember that sort of structural piece, then we're going to turn people off as well. And I think the mythos part then starts to be, that's where the psyche comes in, right? That's where this sort of intuitive connection that people have. I was listening to your promo for the Smoky Mountains podcast that you're doing, and listening to that language, right? It's keying into things that people are yearning for, and they have particular images about, and so, and that's a beautiful little tasty little bit of mythos just in that promo. Because, and it's mostly, I think, about just inviting people in. I talk a lot about, I used to do a lot of marketing writing, and I used to talk about how the best marketing writing was like a haiku. It isn't Moby Dick, right? We don't want to read 400 pages. We want it to be cooked down and really evocative and invite us in. And so, and I think maybe part of it is that's to think about mythos in that way in storytelling and content. You're inviting people in, and then part of what you're presenting to them once you're talking to them is the logos of how it works and why they should trust you to come and get whatever that they're looking for from you.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because the preciseness of language has always been important to me, and the content is, it was important to be precise. But an interesting thing has happened since we went to the bank with Google is now content has become not only about conveying the message, but also appealing to algorithmic spiders and things like that, so that you can get it placed so that changes the equation a little bit, to actually have a little bit more long form. So I think that'd be a challenge, right? To try to tell the story concisely and appealing to the emotion, at the same time filling it out so the algorithm thinks that you're an expert on this particular thing.
Right. And how many times you've used the same word, which, in writing class, you're told, don't do that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's some things that, that are important. For example, you talk about modern cultural myths, right? And I sometimes call the zeitgeist. How does your marketing fit within the stories and myths of what's going on in culture now? Because it's critically important, right?
I think it really is, and we actually talk a lot about this at Spillian, and I think the pandemic actually has been an amazing opportunity to learn about what's cooking in for people in that way, because we've as much as we've been wearing masks, our masks have slipped. Like we're making really clear decisions about what we value. So part of what we talk about and look at a lot at Spillian is, what is it that people are hungering for? If they're hungering for a workshop experience, or they're hungering for a wedding, and how do we invite them into what we think is important, but in a way that is relevant to them, because marketing writing only helps. It doesn't help if you only tell your story and you're so caught up in your own story, you're not aware of who the audience is. You always have to be sort of stepping out and looking back in at yourself and thinking about, what is it people are wanting, and what is it, people talk a lot about what's the pain point that you're answering, right, in good marketing. And I don't like characterizing it that way, at least for the kinds of work that I do, because I'd rather it be more generative than that. But that, there is some truth to that. We had just a few days ago, actually, we had this really cute young guy call us and was talking to my husband about Spillian, and he said, I've been in the Hunger Games of wedding venues. Oh, thank God I found you, because we're not predatory. And that again, first of all, what a fabulous kind of marvelous image. Like, we knew exactly what he was talking about.
Exactly right.
Exactly what he was talking about, and how painful it was. So he was responding to a pain point, but so I think it's always this dance between what is it we value, and then how does that connect out to the rest of the world, and what is the zeitgeist. And one of the things I think that's changed in the pandemic era is people are crafting their lives in a different way, right? We had this weird moment of being cryogenically frozen, most of us, for at least a year. and couldn't go anywhere. And so suddenly we're making sourdough and we're planting tomatoes and now we're all playing Wordle. But underneath that, I think there's been an opening of what is it that I really want my life to be, and how can I be an active participant in that, and not just feel like I have to respond to what's being offered to me.
Well, it's interesting, you talk about that. And I think people have been crafting that, but they've also become much more aware of the tribe they belong to.
Yes.
I mean, we've always been, you talk about polarized, but we're not polarized. It's not two opposites. It's multiple viewpoints on life, right? That cross over. You look at people that are anti-vaccine. You got people that are on the far right that are talking about freedom, and then the far left are because they feel like it's violating their body or it's dangerous, whatever. But they form a tribe around vaccination, though everything else about what they believe in is really a polar opposite.
Radically different. Yeah.
So it's not, so it's not polarization, it's tribalism that we have. And so I talk about in this context with the modern myths that you have to pick the myths that are going to work for the tribes that best fit at your place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And as an example, I did a vaccine mandate at my place, the Meadowlark Motel, and I knew it was going to be problematic, but it was more problematic than expected. Is 90% of the staff quit because it is in an area that that is
sitting in a different
in an area. So yep. I was facing trouble, and I actually had to clean rooms and do everything myself. Right? Oh yeah. So I reached out to the local paper. They did a story. Then it got picked up by the national press, by the Charlotte Observer, front page news there. It went all over the country. I got lots of interesting responses and even some threats, but I also got a tribe. People from all over started reaching out, and that's where we went from like maybe a 10% growth per month, just pandemic related, because the people coming to the mountains, we went to 150% growth, right? Because we totally identified the tribe. Right.
And you told the story, right?
And told the story. Yeah.
So I actually saw that article. It was amazing. Yeah, there's a picture of Joseph with a vacuum or something. I feel your pain, man.
I know, right? You've been there. Yeah.
Oh, been there. Yep, been there.
Yeah, so when I went to the Joseph Campbell Foundation, you talked a lot. That thing you talked, and there was a lot of talk about archetypes.
Yes.
Can you tell our audience what that is and how they figure into creating content?
So I think archetypes are another concept that Carl Jung didn't invent, but sort of focused on, and it reflects sort of what I was talking about earlier in terms of what are those big things that we all hunger for. And so they're images or ideas that hold a certain kind of energy or truth. I'm being really vague, so I'm going to give you an example. The simple, obvious one, the archetype of mother, right? Big one. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got one. Everybody's got feelings about mom. There's a lot of layers in it. And one of the things that I think is really cool about archetypes is that they're big and they're rich and they're deep. So they're everywhere, but people can come at them very differently. And so if you look through, there are lots of them. So going back to what you were talking about in the promo for your Smoky Mountains talk, mountains being in the mountains is a kind of archetypal experience, right? And that's what people were reaching for there. And so if you look across the board, your days are filled with connecting with these big things, a sense of home, a sense of what comfort is, to go back to what I was talking about before, anything that sort of moves you emotionally in a way that is, as you look at it, you think, oh yeah, like we all have a version of this. Mm-hmm. And so they're big, and how they can be useful, I think, when you're building content marketing, is that it's a way to go into how people are, what they're hungering for, because we're all feeling it. So when you're going back to your conversation about, or your mention of the tribe of coming out at Meadowlark and saying, gotta wear the masks, and then finding this tribe, what you found there, people found a particular sort of archetypal energy in that connection with you, in how you take care of people, for example, or what your sense of of how the world should work in community. So sort of an archetype around community versus somebody who may be vehemently anti-vax, who's more motivated by an archetype around what they perceive of as freedom or liberty. And sometimes they can intertwine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I see it. It's interesting. I've been studying lately memorable tourism experiences I mentioned, and they have a scale called the experience scale, and it's all based upon emotions, which is hedonism, knowledge, refreshment, local culture, these things. In fact, we just did a podcast on Gateway to the Smokies about comfort in the Smokies. All right.
Online, man. I love it. I love it.
Which is based upon hedonism, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So hedonism would be an archetype, sort of a generic archetype, and then things like comfort or lots of food or drink or would be these sort of.
You can go in. So an image for that coming out of Greek mythology would be Dionysus, right? The guy,
right. Yeah.
All of the wine and all of the stuff, and all of this life force, and a kind of chaotic life force. You didn't trust Dionysus and his followers and his tribe. They were really fun, but they were not the people you needed to bring you to the airport,
Yeah. All right, we got to take our final break and come back. We'll finish up talking about some of the things you're doing these days. All right.
Join us every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern for the Mind Behind Leadership, where we focus on what leadership really means to us and to others. We have practical discussions with the CEOs of some of the world's largest companies, owners of small businesses, and experts in psychology and behavior to get that inside track, what to do, what to avoid, and what really happens. Join me, Graham Dobbin, at the new time, 4 p.m. every Tuesday for the Mind Behind Leadership, here live on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Howdy, this is Joseph Franklin McElroy back with the Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast and my guest, Leigh Melander. So Leigh, not a lot of time, but you have a lot going on, so I want to hit the highlights.
Cool.
Now, we've talked about Spillian a lot, but it is, I know it's a mission-driven company. Can you just tell what that mission is and how do you bring it into life?
Yeah, so it's a place about imagination and possibility, and we are really driven by wanting to feel abundant about that and helping people find their way into abundance, about imagining that our tagline is about imagining past what you think is possible. There's a line from a philosopher we use a lot called, his name is Gaston Bachelard, he's a Frenchman, that imagination is the voyage into the land of the infinite. And so we're really trying to take that energy and land it in place in a particular way and hold the responsibility that we have to the place in the community and to the folks that are there, and help people find this sort of creative, imaginative abundance with whatever they're doing. So we try to really live that every moment that we possibly can in every decision we make.
You do some wonderful workshops and retreats there. I went to a fly fishing one, and you have like what you call the Imaginal Institute that does these events, but you bring history and myth into the workshops. It's not just how you execute putting a fly in the water. It was, the mythology of flies, the history of,
the storytelling is part of it.
Storytelling,
Right?
tall
It's called
tales.
trout tales.
Yeah.
Yep. Because it's all about how big the fish was.
In fact, it's inspired me. I'm trying to put together one. We're trying to put together one in April
excellent.
in the Metal Art too. I'll have to talk to you more about that. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
But so what are some things coming up with you guys at Spillian?
Well, we actually we have mostly right now we're doing weddings. We're playing catch up. So we're kind of retooling a little bit. We were doing these mythic weekends, and I'm trying to get more disciplined about kind of landing in the stuff that really speaks to me, because I can get really excited. I'm the queen of the jangly keys. Ooh, that's exciting. So this year we're kind of retooling that a little bit and really thinking about going deep. I've got a workshop that I just did actually a couple weeks ago on women and dragons, and finding dragon as an archetype for women to kind of lean into. That's a different way of feeling like you're being a good girl. Tired of being a good girl. So we're playing with ideas like that, and are looking to see how that kind of reinvents itself over this next year as we're catching up with a whole lot of people who are really sad about having to cancel their wedding, postpone their wedding. So,
well, you've got a workshop coming out, right?
I've got, I'm doing actually online, and I'm doing with an organization called the Jung Platform, which is at jungplatform.com. And I think it starts, you can start registering on February 19th. And it's really an extension of the conversation that we're having in a lot of ways. It's it's called Living Mythically, and which is a title that I was a little crunchy with, because I think it can be one of the challenges about working with myths is it's deep and it's complicated, and it isn't about you. It's like it's coming in towards you rather than out as much as anything else. And so people can get caught up in kind of feeling like, oh, I'm so mythic, and I think that's the wrong move. But it's me being opinionated about what myth does and how it can really affect us and impact us. And I think there's a bunch of ideas about how to really sort of climb in and learn to see it. Once you start to see it and start to have those tools, you start to see it everywhere. And I think it actually can change how you talk and communicate in some kind of cool ways.
Cool.
And, yeah.
Well, I mean, you should do a workshop together on content marketing, and then bring in mythology and stuff.
Yeah, let's do it. I love it.
Yeah, that'd be fun. So you have a book, right?
I do. And it's called Psyche's Choice, The Frivolous Rebellion. It came out of actually my doctoral dissertation, and it's about creativity. And I was working ideas around frivolity as being walking in the world in a way that doesn't mean you're totally connected to outcome. It's kind of an anti-capitalist move in some ways. It's a rebellious move, a little tiny rebellion. And the basic premise was that we can open imagination if we stop being so caught up in where we need to land. Right? We can be so outcome driven in this culture that we end up losing the journey because we're so stuck in the stuff. So there's a version of the Psyche and Eros story, and Psyche was, in the Greek mythology, really an archetypal reflection of the human psyche, who in the story falls in love with the archetype of love itself, which is pretty cool. And in my version of the story, she gets what she wants when she stops doing what everybody else wants her to do and becomes frivolous and a little rebellious. So it's a book kind of exploring that, and again trying to help people find ways to break open imagination in ways that they hadn't necessarily thought about before.
And where can they get that book?
They can get it on Amazon. Right now it's an ebook. If you are on Kindle Prime, you can actually get it for free. And it's in the next month or so, I think maybe 2 months, it'll be coming out in print also from Amazon.
Are you doing the print on demand from Amazon?
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, it's an easy way to do it. And it's a way, what I love about it actually as a writer is I can play with stuff and I can tweak it and not make a huge commitment into a huge print run of a book, and really kind of, again, this is actually what we were talking about before about creating the iterations of the story. I can see how it works. I can go back and I can tweak it and I can make it better. So it becomes a very fluid way of publishing, which is kind of fun. There's a lot of books that are kind of lined up over this next year or so coming out of that effort, which is exciting.
Fabulous. Well, I look forward to being able to come up to your when you open up and have guests again, that would be great. I'll keep track of that.
Yeah.
But for people wanting to do very creative weddings, how would they find out more about Spillian and what you guys do?
Easy to find us on Spillian.com. Spillian is SPILLIAN.com. It's a word that means to play or to jest or to revel. So it's about coming and having a deep, playful, reveling, rebellious, wonderful time.
And how do they find out more about you and connect with you, and if they want to communicate with you?
Find me either on LeighMelander.com, and it's Leigh, Leigh Melander.com, or mythamericaradio.com. So I watch all three of those places. Would love to chat. If anything sparked for you here, I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. And you do workshops for companies and things like that, right? So
yep. And we will again, sort of in next year. We're up to our eyeballs right now doing a wedding game this year, but next year we're hoping to be doing some more of that again.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anything else you want to let our audience know about?
I think we covered it. You drive the bus really well, Mr. McElroy. It's really nice to see your face, man. I've missed you.
Oh, yes. Well, we have to get together as soon as we can. All right.
Love it. That would be great. Thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Thank you. So this has been the Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast. We're on the talkradio.nyc network, which is a network of live podcasts that happen daily. They're very good shows. They range from business shows to self-help to travelogues to alternative health and a number of different things. I have another one on this network called Gateway to the Smokies. So that's on Tuesdays from 6 to 7. And then this one is Wise Content Creates Wealth. That's from noon to 1 on Fridays. You can find out more about this podcast by going to wisecontentcreateswealth.com, or you can go to facebook.com/wisecontentcreateswealth. My company is Galileo Tech Media. You can go to GalileoTechMedia.com to find out more about us as a company. We employ some of the top consultants in the world who live and work across the globe, allowing us to source the brightest and best strategists, technologists, copywriters, and general digital marketers. And we have a core principle of a work-life balance that allows our consultants to do the best work from anywhere in the world. And it's been a big benefit for that, working with our team, that we've been doing this since 2014. Now that the pandemic hit, we've been very successful with large corporations and small, helping them continue their content marketing. We have some of the best travel writers in the world, and we specialize in some things called memorable tourism experiences, which should have a better revisit intention and brand loyalty that is measurable to see. So thank you. I will see you next week on the same time in the same place. And again, thank you, Leigh. We'll talk to you later.
My pleasure.